This is Rodney Sacks, the mastermind behind Monster Energy's rise to become a $50 billion cultural phenomenon. Imagine creating a brand so powerful that people wear it like a badge of honor. A company that created an identity around caffeinated sugar water and managed to turn it into the best performing stock on the market over the last 30 years. You might be wondering, how did a company selling canned energy drinks become the best performing stock in an age where all these tech giants were reshaping our world? Well, Monster's story to become the global sensation it is today is one that's full of twists and turns. The story starts with bankruptcy. Back in 1988, the company that went on to become Monster was on its knees, going bankrupt after overextending way too quickly. A couple of years later, in 1990, Rodney Sacks had bought what many would have considered to be a failed business, and that's when he started laying the foundations for the historic run they've been on. Having grown well over 187,000% since then, they've outperformed literally everyone else on the market. But the thing is, it wasn't just about creating energy drinks. It was about creating an identity, a lifestyle, and a movement that people were proud to be a part of. And they created all of this while Red Bull was dominating the global market and continuing their own meteoric growth. Monster's success wasn't straightforward. They managed to transform a simple can into a powerful symbol of rebellion and adventure through a three-pillar strategy at the core of their success. A strategy we're going to dive into later in this video. But first, Rodney Sacks arrived in the US from South Africa in 1989, having already built a big reputation for himself in his homeland, where he became the youngest ever partner at the country's most prestigious law firm. He packed his bags and moved his family to California after seeing the opportunity to break into a product category that had been growing rapidly in recent years: smoothies. The smoothie market had been growing really quickly, and no single brand had been able to capture the majority of consumers in the segment. Sacks knew that the first thing he needed to figure out was how he'd get his products onto his customers' hands, and that's why he turned to Hansen's. Where others saw a dead company, Sacks saw an opportunity. Hansen's had been a staple in Hollywood since the 1930s, but after a period of rapid overexpansion, the company had to file for bankruptcy. They had sold off their manufacturing capabilities and even their name to pay off their debts, but Sacks realized that they still had the one thing he needed: distribution. To buy Hansen's, Sacks had to raise almost $10 million from his friends and family, and even had to take on millions of dollars of Hansen's debt after the purchase went through. You might look at that and think, yeah, if I had friends that had $10 million to lend me, I'd be able to do this too. But that's not really how it works. Just imagine you do have a rich friend and you want them to look at investing in your company. If they didn't trust you, know how intelligent you are, or how hard you work, they'd have no reason to give you the money. These guys are looking for opportunities to turn their money into more money. And if you aren't someone that they think can make them that return, why would they want to give it to you? Sacks had put in 20 years of hard work at South Africa's biggest law firm. During that time, he rubbed shoulders and developed relationships with some of the country's richest people. He had proven his competence and his ability to execute, and even when it came to the idea, he not only had to pitch them on a vision that they could believe in, but also convince them of his ability to give it life in a way that would make them a return on their investment. With the money secured and Hansen's acquired, Sacks was ready to dive into the smoothie market. But fate had other plans. As Sacks and his team were launching their first line of smoothies, a European brand that was relatively new in America was catching their eye: Red Bull. The energy drinks market was exploding in the US, and he saw it as an even bigger opportunity to tap into a different product category that was becoming a big part of youth culture. That decision proved to be a turning point for the company, as Sacks shelved its smoothie dream and threw everything into reinventing the company as one that sold energy drinks. With minimal branding and a bit of work in the lab, they launched Hansen's Energy, but it wasn't a huge success. They positioned it as a health drink, focusing on the herbs, wellness, and anti-aging properties, but quickly realized it was the wrong approach in the wrong market. With that being said, it was the lessons they learned from that first venture into the energy drink sector that would pave the way for the immense success that Monster would go on to have. Seeing the success Red Bull was having with the 18 to 25-year-old male market and the raving fans they had created for their drinks, Sacks realized that they needed to completely reinvent their strategy. It was that realization that led to the true birth of Monster Energy in 2002, as they began laying the groundwork to execute their master plan. It wasn't just about tweaking the recipe or changing the logo. It was about creating a brand that would not just revolutionize the industry, but catapult their struggling company into a $50 billion powerhouse. Monster Energy's rise didn't come about because they created a good drink. It happened because they engineered a cultural phenomenon, one that would define a generation of rebellious teens, action sports athletes, and thrill seekers around the world. To do that, Sacks and his team created a strategy that revolved around 3 key pillars. The first of these pillars was visibility. Monster's success came from a hyper-focused strategy where they didn't just try to appeal to everyone, but rather focused on a very specific group of young men. They knew their target audience, primarily men who were 16 to 34, who were drawn to edgy, adventurous lifestyles and counterculture symbols. Instead of depending on these guys to find them, Monster went where they were. The brand was front and center, focused on positioning Monster alongside other popular trends and brands that their target demographic thought were cool at the time. They focused on being the outsider's choice by positioning themselves as a raw, edgy brand that embraced counterculture and stood for values that these people believed in, pushing boundaries, living life on the edge, and rebelling against the ordinary. Monster became involved in extreme sports, sponsoring events like Supercross, MotoGP, and Street League skateboarding. They were regular fixtures at music festivals like Warped Tour and Rock am Ring. And by aligning themselves with UFC fighters, BMX riders, and even F1 world champion Lewis Hamilton, Monster became more than just a drink. It became a visible symbol of an adrenaline-fueled lifestyle. Beyond visibility, the second of their key pillars was loyalty. It wasn't just enough to be seen. Monster needed to create lifelong fans. They needed to build a community of brand evangelists who would proudly wear the Monster logo and spread the word, resonating with the Monster brand and what they stood for. They went well beyond just sponsoring events, really tying themselves into the culture of the sports that Monster involved themselves in. They created the Monster Army, a program that nurtured and supported young athletes involved in action sports. BMX rider Bryce Tryon, for example, has spoken about how Monster funded his entire career, helping him move up the ranks and eventually becoming a fully sponsored athlete. Their strategy with loyalty wasn't just about creating future brand ambassadors. It was about fostering this sense of community and actively showing themselves to be invested in the future of where these sports were going. Monster campaigns weren't just about getting their brand out there. They were calls to action. Their Unleash the Beast campaign became much more than a slogan. It was an encouragement for their customers to embrace their wild side and push the boundaries in life. Ultimately, their strategy was designed to create the effect of the secret sauce behind everything they did: belief. That was their third pillar. The brand wasn't just selling their product. They were selling a lifestyle, a set of values. They wanted their brand to be something that people could identify with on a deep emotional level and wear it as a symbol to showcase who they were to the world. By linking their name to an image of rebellion, adrenaline, and extreme energy, Monster went way beyond the content of its cans to become a cultural movement which differentiated itself from other energy drinks, especially Red Bull. Ironically, because of how they positioned themselves, even controversy played into Monster's hands. When energy drinks were coming under fire over health concerns in 2013, Rodney Sacks was called in to testify before Congress and defend the products he had created, which ended up only cementing the brand's rebellious image. The drink that parents, teachers, and politicians didn't want you to have? For Monster's target audience, that was the ultimate endorsement and only served to solidify them in people's minds. The results of Monster's strategy to transform their brand were nothing short of phenomenal. From being a penny stock when the first batch of cans hit the shelves in 2002 to a $50 billion valuation today, Monster Energy can claim the title of being the best performing stock of the last 30 years. their success with their customer base has seen sales grow year on year since 2008, bringing in over $6 billion in 2022 alone. As much as Monster's success has been tremendous over the last 2 decades and they executed a revolutionary strategy, one of the most interesting parts of their story is the fact that they did all of this without being the biggest name in the space, all while the world's leading energy drinks brand became a global staple in their own right. Monster, or Hansen's before them, were a publicly traded company for years before their famous cans even existed. And the truth is that they only entered the energy drinks market because they saw the success that Red Bull was having in America. Red Bull had sold its billionth can before Monster even hit the shelves. They had created international sporting events, one of the most successful F1 teams in the 21st century, and a network of football clubs around the world. The Red Bull target demographic has always been much broader than Monster's, where rather than going all into extreme sports, they also focused on students and nightclubs, becoming the go-to drink for a late-night library session as much as turning up at the club. Red Bull may sell energy drinks, but as a company, their scope goes well beyond that. The fact that Red Bull have always had the biggest market share of energy drinks and are considered the third largest soft drinks company in the world, behind Coca-Cola and Pepsi, is even more of a testament to what Monster have done in competing with them. The genius in Monster's strategy was that they didn't try to out-Red Bull Red Bull. Instead, they carved their own niche. Where Red Bull was sleek and mainstream, Monster was edgy and counterculture. Where Red Bull had a broad appeal, Monster focused intensely on their core audience. When you look at the two companies' valuations today, it may look like Monster is almost twice as big as Red Bull. But in truth, Monster is a publicly traded company, while Red Bull is privately owned, so there's not really a direct comparison to make there. In the end, Rodney Sacks proved that you don't have to be the biggest to be the best. By creating a brand that resonated so deeply with its audience that it became a cultural movement, they didn't really compete with Red Bull. They created their own category. Monster created a cultural impact that may have been smaller and less visible to the world at large, but one that stuck with and fostered a community of exactly who they were aiming to have as their audience. From a failed smoothie company to a $50 billion cultural icon, Monster Energy's story is a masterclass in branding, how to create a subculture, and the power of creating their own category for themselves. It not only created the best performing stock of the last 30 years, but it also created a brand whose customers can be recognized and who are usually proud to be associated with them around the world. There's another man who managed to carve his image into the cultural imagination of his own time so well that he's literally remembered as the richest man in history. And you can learn all about his story right here.